I've decided to terminate your position effective immediately. My boss's voice sliced through the applause as I stood on stage clutching my innovation award. The golden statue felt suddenly heavy in my hands as 200 employees stopped clapping in unison. My heart crashed against my ribs, while my mind struggled to process what was happening. Beside the CFO sat Valencia, my boss's new hire of 3 months, wearing an expression caught between triumph and pity. I looked across the banquet hall of the Grand Hyatt where we held our annual company gala. Co-workers I'd spent 5 years alongside stared back with expressions ranging from shock to uncomfortable fascination. The weight of public humiliation threatened to crush me, but something deep inside refused to crumble. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations on your decision." The words left my mouth with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. Before walking off stage, I handed Darian an envelope I'd prepared just in case. When he opened it, his face transformed. The color vanished from his cheeks and his eyes widened with horror. Then he started screaming. Before I continue further with what happened next and why my boss completely lost his composure, I want to thank you for listening to my story. If you're finding it interesting so far, please hit like and subscribe for more real stories of workplace justice. Your support means everything, and I promise this story only gets more intense from here. My name is Farah, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead developer for an assistive technology project that changed everything about my career and my life. People who meet me usually describe me as thoughtful, detail-oriented, and maybe a bit too passionate about my work. What they don't know is that my drive comes from somewhere deeply personal. 9 months before that awards ceremony, our technology firm had secured its largest contract ever, a $14 million deal to develop a groundbreaking communication system for children with severe speech disabilities. The foundation funding the project had selected us over competitors twice our size because of my innovative adaptive interface design. The project wasn't just another career opportunity. My younger brother Liam had been born with a rare neurological condition that severely limited his ability to communicate. For 15 years, I watched him struggle with devices that couldn't adapt to his unique needs. When he was 17, the isolation became too much. I found his goodbye note one Tuesday morning before school. Even that final message had been painstakingly difficult for him to create. I channeled that grief into creating something revolutionary, a system that could truly adapt to each child's specific capabilities, rather than forcing children to adapt to technology. The interface I designed used machine learning to recognize and respond to even the smallest intentional movements, creating communication pathways previous technology couldn't achieve. The early results were stunning. Children who had been deemed unreachable by other systems were suddenly expressing themselves. Parents cried during demonstrations. Our test group expanded from 20 families to over 100, each story more moving than the last. Darian, our department head, initially supported the project wholeheartedly. He showcased our progress at every board meeting and investor presentation. Our stock price climbed, and we were featured in technology publications nationwide. The trouble began when Valencia joined our team. She had an impressive resume, PhD, from Stanford, previous executive position at a major tech company. Darian introduced her as a strategic consultant to help scale our innovation. Something felt wrong from the start, but I couldn't place it. "We need to make this commercially viable," she explained during her first presentation. "The current design is brilliant, but too resource-intensive for mass production." I tried explaining that the adaptive elements were essential to the system's effectiveness. Without them, we'd just be creating another one-size-fits-most solution that would leave behind the children with the most complex needs, exactly the children who needed us most. Valencia smiled with practiced patience. "We can address the edge cases in version 2. That's when I realized they weren't seeing children, they were seeing market segments. Over the following weeks, I was gradually excluded from key development meetings. My access to certain project servers became temporarily restricted due to security updates. When I questioned Darian, he assured me everything was fine. "Trust the process, Farah. We're just streamlining." 2 weeks before the awards ceremony, I noticed one of our test families hadn't submitted their weekly usage data. I called Elena, whose daughter Marina had made remarkable progress with our original system. "We had to stop using it," Elena said, her voice tight with frustration. The update made it impossible for Marina to navigate independently. She's back to using her old picture cards. Update: I hadn't authorized any updates to the test group's software. That night, I used my emergency administrative credentials to access the development server. What I found made me physically ill. They had systematically stripped away the core adaptive features of my design, replacing them with a simplified template-based approach that reduced manufacturing costs by nearly 60%. The modified system would work perfectly for children with common communication patterns, about 70% of users. The rest would struggle or fail entirely with the interface. Children like Marina, children like my brother. The documentation revealed the changes had been approved by both Darion and the board's executive committee. Projected profit margins had increased dramatically, and the timeline to market had been shortened by 8 months. But what made my blood freeze was the marketing plan. They were still using testimonial videos from our original test families, including Marina's, despite knowing the commercial version would no longer serve these same children. I downloaded everything and spent the night building a comprehensive comparison document showing exactly what the changes meant for real children in the program. I included side-by-side videos demonstrating how specific individuals would lose communication abilities with the new design. The annual awards ceremony was 2 days away, and I had been nominated for the Innovation Excellence Award for my original design work. The irony was crushing. I debated confronting Darion privately, but realized he had already chosen his path. Instead, I prepared materials for the board members who hadn't been part of the executive committee decision, particularly those with backgrounds in education and healthcare. The night of the ceremony arrived. I sat through dinner, barely tasting the expensive catering, nodding through conversations I couldn't focus on. When they called my name for the Innovation Award, the applause felt like a cruel joke. I accepted the trophy with a brief, appropriate speech, thanking my team and the families who had trusted us with something so precious. That's when Darion stepped up to the microphone, glass of champagne in hand, and tore my world apart with 11 carefully chosen words. I stood frozen as the crowd's stunned silence pressed in from all sides. Darion's announcement had left me publicly humiliated in front of everyone I'd worked with for years, colleagues who just moments ago had been applauding my accomplishments. The envelope I'd handed him contained 3 key items. First, a detailed technical comparison between my original adaptive design and their stripped-down version, highlighting exactly which children would lose communication abilities. Second, the video testimonials from 5 families whose children would be most affected by the changes. And third, a copy of Section 7.3 from our contract with the Foundation, the Ethical Implementation Clause, requiring that any design modifications must maintain functionality for 100% of the pilot participants. As Darion's screams morphed into incoherent sputtering, board member Winnie Chen rushed to the stage. A former pediatrician before entering the business world, she grabbed the papers from his hands and began scanning them with growing horror. "Is this accurate?" she demanded, looking between Darion and me. "Every word," I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Valencia hurried forward, attempting damage control. "These are preliminary adjustments only. We were planning to address these issues in later." "The production order has already been placed," I interrupted, "and the marketing materials using testimonials from children who can't use the new system are already being printed." I turned to address the room. "I'm sorry to disrupt tonight's celebration, but I couldn't stay silent. This technology was created to give voices to children who have none. I cannot stand by while those voices are silenced again for the sake of profit margins." Darion finally regained his composure enough to hiss, "Security, please escort Miss Farah from the building. She's just bitter about organizational changes and trying to sabotage this company." 2 security guards moved uncomfortably toward the stage, but Winnie held up her hand. "Nobody move. As a board member, I'm calling an emergency session right now." She turned to the other board members, scattered throughout the room. "Conference room. Immediately." As the executives hurried from the hall, whispers erupted across every table. Darion grabbed my arm as I moved to leave the stage. "You've destroyed everything," he snarled, low enough that only I could hear. 5 years of working together, and you do this? I was going to offer you a generous severance package." I gently removed his hand. "This was never about the money, Darion." "Then what? Some misguided moral crusade? Wake up. This is business." "No," I said, meeting his eyes directly. This is about children who need us to do better. I walked away, leaving him spluttering on stage. As I moved through the crowd, coworkers parted like water. Some avoided eye contact while others whispered quiet support. My closest colleague, Prisha, grabbed my hand as I passed. "The families are still in the demo room next door," she whispered. "They've been watching the live stream of the ceremony. They saw everything." My heart stuttered. The foundation had arranged for several local families from our pilot program to attend a special demonstration tonight, coinciding with the awards ceremony. They were supposed to meet with board members afterward to share their experiences. "You knew?" I asked Prisha. "Not until last week. I found the revised specifications and couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was going to talk to you tomorrow." Her eyes filled with tears. I never imagined Darian would do this so publicly. I squeezed her hand and made my way to the adjacent conference room where 7 families waited with their children. Elena stood near the door, her daughter Marina beside her in a wheelchair adorned with colorful stickers. "Is it true?" Elena asked as I entered. "They were going to change it?" I nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Marina reached for the tablet mounted on her wheelchair, the prototype using my original design. Her fingers moved in the unique pattern we'd developed specifically for her motor capabilities. The synthetic voice spoke, "Thank you for fighting for us." That moment broke something inside me. The professional facade I'd maintained throughout the confrontation crumbled. I knelt beside her wheelchair, finally letting tears flow. "I promised it would be your voice, not just any voice," I said. The door burst open as Winnie and 2 other board members entered. Their faces reflected a mixture of anger and determination. "We need to speak with all of you," Winnie addressed the families. "And Farah, the board chair would like you to join us in the main boardroom immediately." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of explanations, technical discussions, and emotional testimonies from parents. The board split into factions, with Winnie leading the charge to preserve the original design. Darian and his supporters argued for a phased approach to implementation, insisting that market considerations needed to balance against individual needs. Near midnight, the board chair finally rendered a decision. Development would revert to my original specifications immediately. A third-party ethics committee would review all project decisions moving forward. Darian would remain in his position, but with oversight from a newly formed accessibility compliance team. It felt like victory, but as I drove home that night, exhaustion replaced adrenaline. I had saved the project, but destroyed my career at the company. No matter what the board decided about Darian's actions, I knew my position there was untenable now. When my phone rang at 6:30 the next morning, I expected it to be HR, with termination paperwork. Instead, it was Josephine Ibarra, the director of the foundation funding our project. "I'd like to meet with you," she said without preamble. "Not at your office. Somewhere neutral." We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near the waterfront at 9 a.m. When I arrived, Josephine was already seated at a corner table, elegant in a simple blue dress that contrasted with her silver hair. 3 large binders sat on the table before her. "I've been watching you for some time," she said as I sat down. "Long before last night. I don't understand." She opened the top binder, revealing detailed notes about my original design process, complete with annotations in her precise handwriting. "Our foundation has funded 17 different communication technology initiatives over the past decade," she explained. "Do you know how many truly prioritize the hardest to reach children? Not the easiest market segments, but the children that most developers consider edge cases?" I shook my head. "Just yours," she said simply. "When we selected your company, it was specifically because of your approach. I've been concerned about the direction things might take once large-scale production discussions began." She slid the second binder toward me. Inside were detailed reports about previous projects from other companies, projects that had started with promising adaptive designs only to be watered down for commercial release. "What happened last night was unfortunately predictable," Josephine continued. "What wasn't predictable was finding someone willing to risk everything to maintain the integrity of the original vision." She opened the third binder, which contained what appeared to be architectural plans. "Our foundation has been considering establishing an independent research and development lab focused exclusively on adaptive communication technology. No shareholders demanding quarterly profits. No executives cutting corners to meet bonus targets." She looked up at me intently. "We need someone to lead it, who truly understands what's at stake. My heart began pounding as I realized what she was suggesting. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you the chance to build something that can't be compromised, she corrected, with complete creative control and direct accountability to the families we serve. As the implications sank in, my phone buzzed with a text from Prisha. Chaos here. Board in emergency session again. Valencia resigned this morning. Everyone's asking about you. I stared at Prisha's text, then looked back at Josephine, who waited patiently. They're in damage control mode, I said, sliding my phone across the table. Valencia, already resigned. Josephine nodded. Not surprising. People like that always protect themselves first. She tapped the architectural plans. This isn't a spontaneous reaction to last night. We've been planning this initiative for months, watching various projects and teams. You were always our first choice, even before yesterday proved beyond doubt where your priorities lie. What about my team? I asked. There are others who believe in the original vision. Bring them, Josephine said without hesitation. We have funding for 20 positions initially, with expansion planned based on development milestones. My mind raced through possibilities: freedom from corporate constraints, direct collaboration with families, no more compromises on features that mattered most. When would this start? Immediately. The laboratory space is already secured. We can have you operational within 3 weeks. I took a deep breath. I need to think about. My phone rang, interrupting me. The company's main number flashed on screen. You should take that, Josephine said, gathering her binders. I'll give you some privacy. Take my card. Call me by tomorrow morning with your decision. As she walked away, I answered the call. Farah, it's Winnie Chen. The board has been in session since 6 a.m. We need you to come in immediately. I'm not sure that's appropriate given. Darian has been suspended pending investigation, she interrupted. We're implementing a complete review of all project modifications. The foundation is threatening to pull funding unless we demonstrate accountability. We need you to walk us through everything. I arrived at headquarters an hour later. The atmosphere was unlike anything I'd experienced in 5 years with the company. People whispered in clusters, conversations halting when I passed. The executive floor bustled with unusual activity as lawyers and board members hurried between meetings. Winnie met me at the elevator. Thank you for coming. It's been illuminating since last night. She guided me toward the main boardroom. The technical changes were just the beginning. We've discovered financial irregularities as well. Inside the boardroom, 7 board members sat around the massive table alongside the company's general counsel. Documents and laptops covered every available surface. The board chair, an imposing woman named Irena, motioned for me to sit. Miss Farah, we owe you an apology and our gratitude. Your actions, while unconventional, have prevented what could have been a catastrophic ethical breach and potentially saved this company from significant legal liability. I sat quietly, waiting. We've suspended Darian effective immediately, she continued. Initial investigation suggests he received personal incentives from manufacturing partners to reduce production costs. Valencia appears to have been brought in specifically to facilitate these changes while providing technical credibility. What about the project? I asked. That's why you're here. We need your assessment of what's required to return to the original specifications. The Foundation has given us 72 hours to present a remediation plan or they'll terminate the contract. I could feel the weight of expectation from everyone in the room. They wanted me to fix the problem and help them save face. I can provide technical documentation, I said carefully, but I won't be returning to lead the project. Stunned silence followed my statement. That's unfortunate timing, Irena finally responded. We were planning to offer you Darian's position. The compensation package would be substantial. It's not about money, I said, thinking about Josephine's offer. It's about ensuring this type of situation never happens again. We're implementing safeguards until the next quarterly report shows declining profits, I interrupted. I believe in what this technology can do. I've seen children communicate with their parents for the first time. I've watched siblings play together who never could before. These aren't market segments or profit centers. They're children who deserve our absolute best. I shared what I could about the technical requirements, then departed amid their continued attempts to persuade me to stay. Walking through the office for what I knew would be the last time, I stopped at my desk to collect personal items. Prisha appeared beside me. You're leaving, she said. Not a question. Yes. Taking another offer? I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. The foundation is establishing an independent lab for adaptive communication technology. They've asked me to lead it. Prisha's eyes widened. That sounds perfect for you. She lowered her voice. The atmosphere here has become toxic. Darian's team is blaming everyone else. People are worried about their jobs, and the executives are panicking about stock prices. Would you be interested in coming with me? I asked. The foundation has approved 20 positions initially. Her face brightened. In a heartbeat. Within 2 weeks, I had resigned officially, recruited 7 team members, including Prisha, and accepted Josephine's offer. We moved into a newly renovated laboratory space located near a children's research hospital. The foundation provided state-of-the-art equipment and, more importantly, direct access to families willing to test and provide feedback on our developing systems. My former company scrambled to salvage the project and their reputation. They eventually delivered a compromised version of the technology, better than what Darian had planned but still missing key adaptive features. The foundation maintained the contract but scaled back funding significantly. Darian wasn't fired immediately. Companies like that rarely cut ties cleanly with executives, fearing legal repercussions and negative publicity. Instead, he was quietly reassigned to an advisory role with limited authority before leaving to pursue other opportunities 6 months later. Valencia fared worse. Her reputation suffered irreparable damage when news of her role in modifying assistive technology for children circulated through industry channels. The last I heard, she had left the technology sector entirely. Our independent laboratory thrived. Without shareholder demands driving decisions, we focused solely on effectiveness. The first generation of our communication system, released 18 months after that fateful awards ceremony, served over 12,000 children across the country. We named the core adaptive algorithm Liam, after my brother. The most rewarding moments came from our regular open houses, where families gathered to share experiences and help shape future developments. Marina, now 10, had become one of our most valuable consultants, offering insights that our adult developers frequently missed. During one such event, Elena approached me while Marina demonstrated the latest interface to newcomers. I never told you something, Elena said, watching her daughter. The night of that awards ceremony, when everything happened, Marina was devastated when we first tried that updated version that didn't work for her. She asked me why the people who made her voice decided she didn't deserve it anymore. My throat tightened. I'm so sorry. No, Elena shook her head. That's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because after watching you stand up there and fight for her, for all these kids, she said something I'll never forget. She said, Mom, that's what it looks like when someone truly hears you. 3 years after leaving my former company, we received an unexpected visitor at the lab. Winnie Chen, who had left the board to return to pediatric medicine, came to see our work firsthand. After touring the facility and meeting with several families, she sat with me in my office. I need to tell you something, she said. Your former company is being acquired next month. The communication technology division is being dissolved. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, genuinely meaning it, despite everything. Don't be. Your departure exposed fundamental issues that were never properly addressed. She looked around at the awards and testimonials lining my office walls. You found your true purpose. They lost their way. She handed me a small package. This arrived at the old office for you. Someone thought I might see you. Inside was my innovation award from that night, the trophy I'd left behind on stage. Attached was a handwritten note. This always belonged to you, Prisha. I placed it on my desk, beside a framed photo of Liam. You know, Winnie said, watching me. Revenge is usually portrayed as this dark, destructive force. But what you did wasn't destruction. You built something better from the ruins of disappointment. That's a different kind of justice. She was right. My revenge hadn't come from exposing Darian's schemes or watching my former company struggle. It came from proving that integrity wasn't a liability, that prioritizing the needs of vulnerable children could create something more powerful than any corporate strategy. Today, 5 years after that awards ceremony, our technology helps over 50,000 children communicate. Each new generation of the system reaches kids previously considered too difficult to accommodate. We've expanded into educational applications and are beginning work on mobility assistance integration. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I'd simply accepted my termination quietly that night. How many children would have received inadequate technology? How many families would have faced renewed disappointment? The most powerful form of revenge isn't making others suffer for their mistakes. It's creating success that would have been impossible under their limitations. It's building something so meaningful that their short-sighted decisions are proven wrong with every child who finds their voice. My brother Liam never got to use the technology that now bears his name, but thousands of children like him use it every day. When I watch them communicate with their families, sharing jokes, expressing preferences, participating fully in their own lives, I know this is exactly what revenge should look like. Not destruction, but creation. Not punishment, but possibility. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more tales of workplace redemption and personal triumph. I watched their faces as the presentation concluded. Not a single muscle moved in the conference room. 9 pairs of empty stares. Then Declan, the division director, cleared his throat and exchanged glances with the others before addressing me. Your ideas are interesting, May. The resource optimization plan shows considerable thought. He paused, tapping his pen against the glass tabletop. However, after careful consideration, we've decided to go in a different direction. My heart dropped, even though I'd anticipated these exact words. I see, I replied, gathering my presentation materials while the silence grew oppressive. Look, you're brilliant. No one disputes that, Declan continued, his tone shifting to something falsely sympathetic. But this is the 9th project proposal where we've reached the same conclusion. You simply don't fit our culture here. He didn't even bother lowering his voice. The statement hung between us, as several executives nodded in agreement. Through the glass walls, I noticed staff members pretending not to watch. The culture, I repeated flatly. Yes, we value team players who understand our established approaches. Declan leaned back, already dismissing me. Someone will take over your work immediately. We appreciate your contributions, but perhaps your vision would align better elsewhere. As I gathered my materials, Phoebe from marketing whispered to Terrence, loud enough for me to hear, another May special. All brilliance, zero practicality. Someone snickered. I tucked my tablet under my arm, taking one last look at the presentation I'd spent weekends perfecting. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the burning knot in my throat. Walking through the office felt like moving through molasses, each step heavy with the weight of yet another rejection. Behind me, through the still open door, I heard Griffin's voice. Now that's settled. Who's joining for drinks at Ivy's tonight? Laughter erupted as the door swung shut. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. This wasn't just about a project. This was systematic. 3 years, 9 different projects, 9 rejections with the identical excuse. My phone buzzed with a message from my only ally, Lena. How bad? I typed back, same story, different day. The elevator doors opened to reveal Declan's executive assistant, Kennedy. Her eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. Oh, May, I heard what happened. Such a shame. Is it? I asked, stepping inside. Kennedy shifted uncomfortably. Between us, your proposal was brilliant, but you know how things work here. I did, all too well. When the doors opened at the lobby, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of walking out, I pressed the button for the 5th floor, records and analytics. If you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told you didn't belong, you know the feeling crawling through my chest right then. If this story resonates with you so far, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, what happens next is something you won't want to miss. My name is May Tanaka, 32 years old, systems analyst with specializations in organizational efficiency and project management. I graduated top of my class, speak 4 languages, and have an uncanny ability to identify inefficiencies that others miss. I'm also, apparently, a walking cultural misfit, according to the leadership at Palmer Innovations. My first removal came 3 years ago. I developed a resource allocation system that would have eliminated redundancies, specifically, certain executives' vanity projects that drained company resources. The division head, Griffin had smiled while explaining I didn't understand the nuances of company culture. The second time was when I suggested promoting talented internal staff instead of hiring expensive outsiders with connections to senior leadership. Terrence had personally shown me the door, explaining that culture fit was as important as competence. By the sixth rejection, I recognized the pattern clearly. Whenever my work threatened their comfortable ecosystem, their lunches, their bonuses, their buddies in middle management, I became culturally incompatible. What broke me wasn't the seventh rejection. It was what I discovered afterward. While clearing my temporary desk, I noticed discrepancies in quarterly performance metrics that others had missed. Year-over-year decline hidden behind creative accounting. Mounting complaints from key clients buried in sanitized reports. The same executives pushing me aside were destroying what had once been an industry leader. That night, I changed my approach. I began quiet conversations with mid-level managers who shared my concerns. Dinners after work, coffee meetings before the day started. We exchanged observations about troubling trends while I cultivated relationships throughout the organization, staying valuable enough to remain employed but never prominent enough to trigger another dismissal. During my eighth rejection, Kennedy had pulled me aside afterward. "They're afraid of you," she whispered. "Your ideas expose their inadequacies." Now, after this ninth rejection, I stood in the fifth-floor records department, facing Tomas, the aging data manager who remembered when the company's founder was still alive. "May? What brings you here?" He adjusted his glasses, peering at me over ancient computer monitors. "I need access to the integrated performance analytics for the last 5 years," I said quietly. "The raw data, not the executive summaries." Tomas hesitated. "That's restricted information, I know, but I also know you've watched what's happening here longer than anyone." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you need it?" I took a breath. "Because someone needs to show the board what's really happening before it's too late." Tomas studied me for a long moment before turning to his keyboard. "I never gave you this," he murmured, typing rapidly. "And if anyone asks, you hacked my system." My tablet pinged with an incoming file transfer. "Thank you," I said. He didn't look up. "Don't thank me yet. What you're about to do will make you enemies." "I already have those," I replied. That weekend, as I pored over the data in my apartment, patterns emerged that confirmed my worst suspicions. Client retention down 47%, innovation metrics falling, employee turnover at record highs in every department except executive leadership. My phone rang, startling me from my analysis. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Miss Tanaka?" An older woman's voice, refined but direct. "My name is Eleanor. I believe we need to talk about Palmer Innovations." "Who is this?" I asked. "Someone who shares your concerns. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you available for brunch tomorrow?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown. I arrived early, scanning the room until I spotted an elegant, silver-haired woman sitting alone by the window. "Miss Tanaka," she greeted me, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." "How do you know who I am?" I asked as I sat down. Eleanor smiled. "Because I make it my business to know when someone is trying to save my husband's legacy." My confusion must have shown on my face. "My husband founded Palmer Innovations 35 years ago," she clarified. "While I'm no longer involved in daily operations, I retain significant voting shares and board influence, and I've been watching you for some time." The waiter arrived with coffee. When he left, Eleanor leaned forward. 9 project removals in 3 years, all with the same excuse about culture, she said. "Tell me, Miss Tanaka, what do you think is really happening at Palmer?" I hesitated only briefly before pulling out my tablet. "I think the current leadership is systematically dismantling everything your husband built, and I can prove it." Eleanor's eyes sparked with interest. "Then perhaps it's time we discussed the future, both yours and Palmer's." As I began sharing my findings, neither of us realized we were being watched from across the restaurant by Kennedy, whose loyalty to Declan was about to be tested in ways none of us anticipated. For 2 hours, Eleanor and I dissected the data. Her sharp questions revealed a mind still razor-focused on business, despite her removed position. This quarterly decline pattern began exactly when the current executive team took control, she noted, tracing the downward trend with a manicured fingernail. "The board sees sanitized versions of these reports. They're burying the warning signs," I confirmed. As we finished our meeting, Eleanor fixed me with a penetrating gaze. You've risked your position by gathering this information. Why? I considered my answer carefully. Because the company deserves better than leaders who reject innovation to protect their comfort. Her lips curved slightly. My husband would have appreciated that answer. She stood, collecting her purse. Continue your work, Miss Tanaka. I'll be in touch. 3 days later, I was summoned to Declan's office. Kennedy avoided my eyes as I passed her desk. Close the door, Declan ordered when I entered. His typically smooth demeanor had hardened. I understand you had a meeting with Eleanor Palmer on Sunday. My pulse quickened. That's my personal time. Not when you're discussing company business. He leaned forward. Kennedy saw you showing company data to an outsider. Mrs. Palmer is hardly an outsider, I countered. She has no operational role here. His voice lowered dangerously. Where did you get restricted analytics data? I maintained eye contact. I analyzed publicly available information. Don't insult my intelligence. Declan stood, circling his desk. You're suspended pending investigation into data theft. Security will escort you out. My stomach dropped. On what grounds? You've proven my point about culture fit, May. You're not a team player. As security walked me through the office, I noticed Lena watching with wide eyes. Griffin and Terrence huddled by the coffee machine, smirking. At home, I paced my apartment, calculations running through my mind. I'd expected pushback, but not this quickly. Kennedy had reported our meeting immediately. My phone lit up with a text from Lena. They're searching your workspace. What's happening? Before I could respond, another message arrived from an unknown number. Stand firm. E. Eleanor. 2 tense days passed. On the third morning, my phone rang at 6:15 a.m. Miss Tanaka, this is Victor Nolan, board chairman at Palmer. His deep voice sounded grave. Your presence is requested at an emergency board meeting this morning, 9 o'clock sharp. I'm currently suspended. I reminded him. I'm aware. This supersedes that action. The matter is urgent. When I arrived, security escorted me not to the boardroom, but to a small conference room where Eleanor waited with 3 board members I recognized from company photos. Thank you for coming, Victor said, gesturing toward an empty chair. Eleanor spoke first. I've called this emergency session to address serious concerns about company direction. She nodded toward me. Miss, Tanaka has helped compile troubling evidence that current leadership is endangering Palmer's future. For the next hour, I presented my findings to increasingly disturbed board members. Victor's face darkened as I detailed the pattern of rejected innovations that could have reversed declining performance. Why didn't operations flag these trends? Asked Olivia, the compliance director. Because operations reports directly to the people concealing the problems, I explained. When I finished, the room fell silent until Victor cleared his throat. Miss Tanaka, would you step outside while we discuss? I waited in the hallway, watching employees arrive for the workday, unaware of the earthquake happening in the small conference room. 20 minutes later, Victor opened the door. We've reached a decision, he said gravely. Please come with me. He led me to the executive floor and into the CEO's empty office. Where's Roland? I asked, referring to the current chief executive. Board members are speaking with him now, Victor replied, straightening a picture frame on the wall. The situation required immediate action. My confusion must have shown. Miss Tanaka, the board has unanimously voted to appoint new leadership, he continued. Someone who understands both our challenges and our potential. I stared at him blankly until his meaning registered. You can't mean... Effective immediately, you are appointed Chief Executive Officer of Palmer Innovations. Victor handed me a folder. These documents outline the board's decision and your authority. Eleanor was particularly insistent. My mind raced. The current executive team will report to you now, he finished. They're being notified as we speak. Through the glass walls, I saw Declan storming down the hallway toward us, face contorted with rage. Behind him trailed Phoebe, Griffin, and the others who had systematically removed me from their projects. What is the meaning of this? Declan demanded as he burst into the office. Victor, you can't be serious. She's under investigation. An investigation you manufactured, Victor replied calmly. The board has reviewed Miss Tanaka's evidence and found your leadership wanting. This is absurd, Phoebe interjected. She has no executive experience. Yet she identified problems you either missed or concealed, Victor countered. I stood quietly, watching the realization dawn across their faces as one by one they understood what was happening. Terrence recovered first, so she charmed the founder's widow. That doesn't qualify her to lead this company. No, I finally spoke. My qualifications are 9 rejected projects that would have reversed our decline, and the vision to see what you've been hiding. The tension in the room was electric. Griffin looked ready to explode while Phoebe seemed on the verge of tears. Declan simply stared at me with cold hatred. The board meeting continues at 11, Victor announced. Miss Tanaka will address the full executive team then. After they left, I sank into the CEO's chair, trembling slightly from adrenaline. Breathe, Victor advised. The hard part begins now. He was right. Within hours, I faced a room full of hostile executives who had spent years dismissing me. Standing at the head of the boardroom table, I felt their resentment like a physical force. I understand this transition is unexpected, I began. Unexpected? Declan interrupted. It's unprecedented and inappropriate. I met his gaze steadily, as was suspending an employee for speaking with a board member. Before he could respond, I distributed folders to everyone present. These contain restructuring plans for each division. You have 2 options: commit to our renewed values of innovation and accountability, or accept the departure terms on page 4. The room erupted in protests until I raised my hand. You've made it abundantly clear that I don't fit your culture. I continued once they quieted. Now you must decide if you can adapt to mine. Griffin slammed his folder shut. This is nothing but revenge. No, I corrected him. This is recovery of Palmer's founding principles and market position. I outlined my immediate priorities: reversing client attrition, implementing 3 of my previously rejected projects, and rebuilding team morale. You have until tomorrow morning to decide your future with Palmer, I concluded. Choose wisely. As they filed out, Lena caught my eye from the doorway where she'd been watching. Her slight smile was the first genuine support I'd seen all day. That evening, as I prepared for my first full day as CEO, Kennedy appeared in my doorway. They're planning something, she said without preamble. I looked up from my notes. Explain. Declan called an off-site meeting with the others at Terrence's house. They're coordinating their response. I expected as much, I replied. Why are you telling me? Kennedy stepped fully into the office, closing the door behind her. Because I've watched you fight for 3 years while they took credit for others' work and buried problems. I'm tired of it. Yet you told Declan about my meeting with Eleanor. She flinched. Yes, a decision I regret. I studied her, weighing sincerity against potential deception. What exactly did you hear them planning? Mass resignations designed to cripple operations. They believe you'll fail without their institutional knowledge. I nodded slowly. Thank you for the warning. After she left, I called Eleanor. They're planning coordinated resignations. As we anticipated, she replied calmly. Are contingency plans in place? Yes, but there's something else we need to discuss. I hesitated. I found irregularities in the financial records that go beyond poor management. Eleanor's voice sharpened. What kind of irregularities? The kind that might interest federal regulators. The silence stretched between us. How certain are you? She finally asked. Certain enough that I've secured the evidence. Proceed carefully, May, she warned. If what you're suggesting is true, they won't simply resign. They'll fight with everything they have. I'm counting on it, I replied. The next morning, I arrived early to find Lena waiting outside my office. You should see this, she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was an email chain between Declan and the others, discussing ways to undermine my leadership. The final message from Declan read, meeting in my office at 8:30. United Front. She'll be gone within a week. How did you get this? I asked. Lena's expression was grim. They included me, thinking I'd side with them. They're gathering in Declan's office right now. I checked my watch. 8:27 a.m. Perfect timing, I murmured. As I approached Declan's office, their voices carried through the partially open door. We present our resignations simultaneously, Terrence was saying. The board will have no choice but to reconsider when they realize she can't run operations without us. What about legal implications? Phoebe asked. There's nothing illegal about resigning, Griffin assured her. Besides, we've been careful too. I pushed the door open. 9 heads swiveled toward me. Please, don't let me interrupt, I said pleasantly. You were discussing resignation strategies? Declan recovered first. This is a private meeting. In a company office, on company time, planning coordinated action against company interests? I shook my head. That's not how privacy works, Declan. What do you want? He demanded. I smiled slightly. I came to save you the trouble of writing resignation letters. From my portfolio, I withdrew a stack of documents and placed them on his desk. "What are these?" Griffin asked, reaching for them. "Termination notices," I replied, effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. Papers flew as Terrence knocked the stack sideways. "You can't do this," Phoebe gasped, her composure cracking. The board would never approve mass terminations of the entire executive team. "They already have," I replied calmly, retrieving the scattered documents. "Each termination includes specific performance failures and policy violations. The board reviewed them individually last night." Declan's face reddened. "This is absurd. We built this company into what it is today." "What it is today," I emphasized, "is a company losing market share, hemorrhaging talent, and concealing its decline from stakeholders." Griffin stepped forward, his tall frame looming over me. "You think you can walk in here after 3 days as CEO and destroy careers built over decades?" I held his gaze. "You did that yourselves. I'm merely making it official." Security appeared in the doorway, not the usual building guards, but external specialists hired for this specific purpose. "This is Eric and his team," I introduced. "They'll escort each of you to collect personal belongings before leaving the premises." Phoebe's laugh held a hysterical edge. "You think it's that simple? We built relationships with every major client. They're loyal to us, not Palmer's logo." "An interesting theory," I agreed. "Let's test it. Call any client right now. Tell them you've been terminated for performance issues and want them to follow you elsewhere." Her confidence faltered. "Security will now escort you to your offices. You have 30 minutes to collect personal items. Company devices stay here." As they were led away, Declan remained, watching me with calculated intensity. "You won't last a month," he said quietly after the others left. "You know operations, but nothing about executive leadership." Perhaps," I conceded. "But unlike you, I recognize what I don't know, and I've already hired people who do." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Your replacement started yesterday," I informed him. "External hires with proven track records, plus several internal promotions of people you consistently overlooked." The truth registered in his eyes. "That's why the board moved so quickly. You already had replacements lined up." "Eleanor and I have been planning this transition for months." I glanced at my watch. "Your 30 minutes starts now." As security led him away, his parting words dripped with venom. This isn't over. He was right. By afternoon, reports came in of executives contacting clients, spreading rumors about company instability. Phoebe had attempted to download client databases before security disabled her access. Griffin had already called 3 industry reporters claiming hostile takeover by an unqualified usurper. I gathered my new leadership team, a mix of external hires and promoted staff who had suffered under the previous regime. "They're fighting back exactly as predicted," I informed them. "Activating client relationships, spreading misinformation, attempting data theft." Lena, now operations director, looked worried. Benning Industries called asking if we're having financial problems. Declan contacted their CEO directly. "Contact each key client personally," I instructed. "Share our growth strategy and the performance data they've never seen. Transparency is our advantage now." "What about the press calls?" asked Jared, our new communications director. "Schedule a media roundtable for tomorrow. We'll address everything directly." As they dispersed, Eleanor called. "The board's receiving concerned calls," she reported. "How are you handling it?" "Exactly as planned," I assured her. "But there's something we need to discuss in person." That evening, I met Eleanor at her home office, a wood-paneled room filled with mementos from Palmer's early days. "You mentioned financial irregularities," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. "Show me." I opened my laptop and displayed a series of transactions I'd uncovered. "These payments to consultant groups in the Cayman Islands," I explained. "They align perfectly with lost contract bids to Westlake Technologies." Eleanor studied the screen, her expression hardening. "You're suggesting bid rigging?" "I'm suggesting the executive team accepted payments to ensure certain contracts went to competitors." I scrolled to another spreadsheet. "These shell companies received consulting fees from Palmer while paying personal accounts belonging to Declan, Griffin, and Terrence." "Self-dealing," Eleanor murmured. "Criminal activity, not just poor management." "There's more," I continued. "Phoebe approved marketing budgets to agencies that hired her brother's production company at inflated rates. The kickback scheme spans at least 3 years." Eleanor's face had gone pale. Why didn't auditors catch this? The audit partner plays golf with Declan every Sunday. She rose abruptly, pacing the room. The board must be informed immediately. Not yet, I cautioned. If we move too quickly, evidence might disappear. I need time to secure everything properly. How much time? 2 weeks, I replied. They'll be desperate by then, making mistakes. We need to let them believe they still have leverage. As predicted, the counterattack intensified. 3 major clients requested emergency meetings after receiving alarming calls from former executives. Industry blogs published speculation about turmoil at Palmer. My personal history was scrutinized, with anonymous sources questioning my qualifications. Through it all, I maintained a calm public face while working 18-hour days, meeting nervous clients, reassuring employees, and secretly gathering more evidence of the corruption that had rotted Palmer from within. On my 10th day as CEO, Kennedy rushed into my office. "They've filed a lawsuit," she announced breathlessly. "Wrongful termination. They're demanding reinstatement and damages." I accepted the legal documents with surprising calm. "Right on schedule. You expected this?" Kennedy looked confused. "It's their only play left." I scanned the complaint. "They're demanding an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Our legal team says we need to prepare immediately." I smiled slightly. "Tell them not to worry. I'll handle this personally." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I finalized what I'd been building since discovering those first financial discrepancies months ago: a comprehensive map of corruption, self-dealing, and corporate sabotage orchestrated by the very people now suing for wrongful termination. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters the next morning. I arrived early, dressed simply but impeccably, carrying a single expandable folder. Inside, I found all 9 former executives huddled with their attorneys. Declan's smirk when he saw me sent a familiar chill down my spine, the same one I'd felt after each project rejection. "Miss Tanaka," their lead attorney greeted me. "We have a few minutes before the judge arrives. Perhaps we could discuss settlement terms?" "I'm comfortable proceeding to the hearing," I replied. Declan stepped forward. "Don't be stupid, May. You fired an entire executive team simultaneously, without proper cause. No judge will uphold that action." "We'll see." When Judge Wilson entered, the proceedings began with the plaintiff's attorney outlining the case. Distinguished executives with combined experience of over 150 years, summarily terminated by a new CEO with no executive experience, clearly motivated by personal vendetta. When my turn came, I approached the bench with my folder. "Your Honor, rather than make opening remarks, I'd like to submit evidence that renders this case moot." The judge nodded, and I handed over the first document. "This is a federal investigation notice served to Palmer Innovations this morning," I explained. "The SEC and FBI are investigating securities fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering charges against the plaintiffs." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Declan half rose from his seat before his attorney yanked him back down. "The plaintiffs weren't terminated for performance issues, though those existed," I continued. "They were terminated for criminal activity discovered during leadership transition." I proceeded to submit evidence of each executive's participation in various schemes: bid rigging, kickbacks, embezzlement through fake consultancies, and market manipulation. "Your Honor, these terminations weren't just appropriate. They were legally required once this evidence came to light. The company would face liability had we retained executives engaged in criminal activity." The judge reviewed the documents with increasing alarm. "Additionally," I continued, "we've learned the plaintiffs attempted to destroy evidence after termination. Federal agents are executing search warrants at their residences as we speak." The courtroom erupted. Through the chaos, I caught Declan's eye. The hatred there had transformed into something else: fear. Judge Wilson banged his gavel repeatedly until order returned. "This hearing is adjourned," he announced. "Given the pending federal investigation, this civil matter is stayed until criminal proceedings are resolved." Outside, reporters swarmed as the former executives hurried to waiting cars, jackets pulled over their heads. "Miss Tanaka," a reporter called, "did you know about the criminal activity when you became CEO?" I faced the cameras calmly. Palmer Innovations has always stood for integrity and innovation. When those values were compromised, the board took decisive action. We're cooperating fully with authorities and focused on rebuilding our company's legacy. Back at the office, my new executive team waited anxiously. When I entered the conference room, they fell silent. "The lawsuit is effectively dead," I announced. but we have challenging work ahead rebuilding what they damaged. The clients? Lena asked. We retain them through transparency, I replied. Share everything, the good and bad, and our plan to improve. Over the following weeks, Palmer transformed. Innovative projects previously shelved were fast-tracked. Talented employees who had been overlooked received recognition and advancement. Clients who had considered leaving renewed contracts after seeing our new direction. 3 months after becoming CEO, I received the final communication I'd been waiting for. Formal indictments against all 9 former executives on multiple federal charges. The evidence I'd meticulously gathered over months had proven overwhelming. That evening, I stood alone in my office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. Eleanor joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. A celebration seems appropriate, she said, offering me one. For the indictments? For the company's recovery. She gestured toward the quarterly report on my desk. First growth quarter in 3 years. Client retention up 18%. Employee satisfaction scores at record highs. I accepted the glass. That's the real victory. My husband would be proud, Eleanor said quietly. Not of the revenge, though I admit that was satisfying, but of how you've restored Palmer's soul. It wasn't revenge, I corrected her gently. It was justice. Is there a difference? I considered this, watching light play across the glass buildings. Revenge would have been simply firing them. Justice was exposing the truth that they now face prison terms while you run their company. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. I smiled at last. Well, perhaps there's a small element of poetic justice. We clinked glasses as my phone buzzed with an incoming message. A news alert showing Declan being led into federal court in handcuffs. 9 times they removed me from projects claiming I didn't fit their culture, I murmured. They never realized they were the ones who didn't fit the culture this company was built on. To culture, Eleanor toasted, and to finally having the right person define it. As I sipped my champagne, I felt not the burning satisfaction of revenge, but something more lasting, the quiet pride of restoration. 9 rejections had led to this moment, not because I'd plotted vengeance, but because I'd refused to abandon what was right. Have you ever stood your ground when everyone said you didn't belong? Have you witnessed corruption hiding behind words like culture and fit? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more narratives about perseverance and justice. Remember, sometimes the path to leadership isn't about fitting in. It's about having the courage to stand out. She's office furniture. Been here forever. Nobody notices her. The words came from behind me at the company lunch, loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear. I knew the voice without turning around. The boss's son, 19 years old, 6 months into his first position here, already talking like he built this place with his own hands. His friends laughed. That kind of laughter that makes you feel smaller even when you're trying not to care. I kept my fork moving through my salad, one bite after another, but everything tasted wrong. My throat felt tight. Something heavy settled into my ribs and wouldn't leave. 28 years. 28 years of showing up before anyone else, of answering questions nobody else knew how to answer, of holding this place together when it was falling apart. And now this boy who still asked me where we kept the printer paper was turning me into a joke his friends could laugh at. I finished my salad, stood up, walked right past their booth without looking, without stopping, without giving them anything to work with, but my hands were shaking when I reached my car, and I had to sit there for 3 full minutes before I trusted myself to drive. I wasn't going home, though. Not yet. I had somewhere else to be first. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you for being here and listening to this. If this story means something to you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me your thoughts, and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything, and you're going to want to hear where this goes. My name is Lena, 53 years old, never married, no kids, and for the last 28 years this business has been the closest thing I have to family. People probably look at me and see someone ordinary, brown hair going gray that I keep pulled back in a simple style, clothes from department stores, nothing fancy. I don't wear much makeup, don't draw attention. I learned a long time ago that being quiet and capable gets you further than being loud and demanding. Or at least, that's what I thought. But here's something most people don't know about me. I remember everything. Every conversation, every number, every document that crossed my workspace in nearly 3 decades. My brain works like a filing system that never stops organizing. When someone asks me about a client from 2008, I can tell them not just the name, but the specific issue we solved and which supplier we used to fix it. When the systems crash and everyone panics, I'm the one who knows exactly where the backup files are because I'm the one who created the backup system in the first place. I drove 15 minutes that day, straight to the county records office. The building is old brick, smells like dust and old paper, staffed by people who've worked there longer than I've worked anywhere. I asked for business filings from 1997. The clerk disappeared into a back room and came back with a thin folder. I sat at one of those long wooden work areas and opened it. Inside was the original partnership agreement, black ink on white paper, 2 signatures at the bottom. One of them belonged to my brother. Let me take you back to 1997, because that's where this really starts. The business wasn't a business yet, not really. It was 3 people crammed into a rented space above a hardware store on the east side of town. The building shook every time a truck drove past. The heat barely worked in winter, but the 2 men who started it didn't care about any of that. They had an idea, and they believed in it enough to bet everything. One of those men was the boss. The father? Back then, he wasn't anyone's father. He was just a guy in his early 30s with more energy than money, more vision than experience. He was good with people, could walk into a room of strangers and leave with 3 new friends and 2 potential clients. But he couldn't balance a budget to save his life. The other man was my brother, Caleb. Caleb was the opposite. Brilliant with numbers, could see patterns in data that nobody else noticed, could build financial models that actually made sense. But put him in a room with people and he'd find a window to stare out of within 5 minutes. He was shy, awkward, kind in a way that made him easy to take advantage of if you weren't careful. They met in college, became best friends, stayed close after graduation. When the boss came up with his idea, he needed capital. Caleb had inherited some money when our parents passed. Not a fortune, but enough. They shook hands, filed the paperwork, and became equal partners. 50-50 split, everything down the middle. I came on board as Caleb's assistant. I was 25, working a job I hated, living in a tiny apartment, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. Caleb called me one night and said, "I need someone I can trust. Someone who'll actually care about this. Come work with me." So I did. $15 an hour, no benefits, but it was family. That mattered. The business grew faster than anyone expected. The boss brought in clients. Caleb managed the money. I handled everything else: paperwork, scheduling, vendor calls, shipping logistics, employee questions. I was the glue nobody saw, but everyone needed. By 2003, we'd moved into a real building, had 20 employees, revenue in the millions. Caleb and the boss started talking about expansion, about hiring managers, about building something that could last. Then one morning in May, Caleb went for his usual run. He was training for a marathon, trying to get healthier, trying to lose the weight he'd carried since childhood. He made it 2 miles before his heart stopped. Just stopped. A jogger found him on the path near the river. Paramedics tried for 40 minutes. It didn't matter. He was 39 years old. The funeral was small. Caleb didn't have many friends outside of work. The boss showed up early and stayed late. He cried harder than I did, which surprised me because I couldn't cry at all. I felt numb, empty. The boss found me standing alone near the parking area afterward and took both my hands. His were shaking. "Please don't leave," he said. "I know this is awful. I know you're hurting, but I can't do this without someone who knew him, who understood what we were building. Please stay." So I stayed, because I didn't know what else to do. Because the business was the last thing I had that connected me to Caleb. Because the boss seemed genuinely lost without my brother, and I thought maybe helping him through it would help me through it too. The months after Caleb died blur together. I worked 12-hour days, took on responsibilities nobody asked me to take on, kept systems running. The boss threw himself into the work too, I think for the same reasons I did. We didn't talk about the partnership paperwork. We didn't talk about what happened to Caleb's 50%. It just sat there, filed away at the county office, and neither of us brought it up. 2 years later, the boss got married, a woman he met through a client. She was nice, normal. They had a small ceremony, invited the whole company. I went, smiled, gave them a gift, went home alone. In 2006, their son was born. The boss brought him into the office, sometimes when he was little. A loud kid, always running, always knocking things over, always demanding attention. Everyone thought he was adorable. I mostly just tried to keep him from breaking anything important. As the boy grew up, the business kept growing. We hit 50 employees, then 100, opened a second location. The boss bought a big house in the suburbs, started driving expensive cars, started talking differently, acting differently. The man who used to eat lunch in the break room with everyone else started eating in his private office with the door shut. His son grew up believing he was royalty. When the boy turned 18, the boss gave him a position, not an entry-level job like everyone else started with, a real position with a title and a salary that made people whisper. When the boy turned 25, the boss made him director of operations. Nobody was surprised. Everyone knew where this was headed. The son was being groomed to take over, to inherit an empire his father built. Except his father didn't build it alone. His father had a partner whose share never got resolved, a partner whose sister still showed up every single day and made sure everything worked the way it was supposed to. But nobody remembered that. Nobody thought about it. I was just Lena, just the woman who'd been here forever. Part of the walls, part of the furniture. The son walked around like he owned gravity itself. In meetings, he talked over people twice his age with 10 times his experience. He sent messages at 2 in the morning and got annoyed when people didn't respond immediately. 3 months before the furniture comment, I watched him explain to a new hire, "She's been here since dinosaurs roamed. Just ignore her. She doesn't do anything important." I was standing 6 feet away. He knew I could hear him. Last week, we had a major buyer coming to tour the facility. This was a huge deal. The kind of client that could double our revenue if we landed them. The boss got sick the night before. Nothing serious, just a bad flu, but enough that he couldn't come in. He called his son at 6 in the morning and told him to handle it. The son gave the presentation. I sat in the back of the room and watched him fumble through slides he clearly hadn't reviewed until that morning. He used words he didn't understand. When the buyer asked about our quality control protocols, the son waved his hand and said, "We've got people for that. It's handled." Those people were me. I built that entire system in 2004 after we had a batch of defective products nearly cost us our 3 biggest clients. I researched best practices. I wrote the procedures. I trained everyone. That system saved this company millions of dollars and countless hours of headaches. But the son didn't know that. He'd never bothered to learn. Why would he? I was just furniture. After the buyer left, the son walked past my workspace without a word. Didn't ask if the presentation went well. Didn't thank me for preparing all the materials he'd used. Just walked past, already on his phone, already thinking about something else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caleb, about those early days above the hardware store when everything felt possible, about the partnership agreement, about 50% ownership with survivorship rights passing to immediate family. When Caleb died, I inherited his half of the business. Legally, officially, the paperwork was clear, but I never said anything. The boss was grieving. The business was fragile. I didn't want to make things harder. I thought maybe later, when things settled down, we'd figure it out. But later never came. Years passed. The business grew. The boss got comfortable. I got comfortable. The paperwork sat in a cabinet in my apartment, and I stopped thinking about it until the furniture comment. That night, lying awake at 3 in the morning, I got up and found the folder, pulled out the original partnership agreement, read it twice, then I read the survivorship clause 5 more times, just to be sure. 50%. Mine. For 28 years. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Bridget. She was in her 60s, ran a small practice downtown, came recommended by someone I barely knew but trusted. When I walked into her office that first morning, she looked up from her computer and said, "What can I help you with?" I put the folder on her workspace. "I need to know if this still means what I think it means." She spent 20 minutes reading through everything. Partnership agreement, business registration, my brother's will, the inheritance documents I'd filed back in 2003. When she finally looked up, her expression told me everything before she said a word. "This is airtight," she said. "You've owned 50% of that business for over 2 decades. Has anyone from the company ever contacted you about this? Offered to buy you out? Asked you to sign anything? Dissolving the partnership? No. Have you received any profit distributions? Any documentation acknowledging your ownership stake? No. I just worked there. I get a salary like everyone else." Bridget leaned back. "They've been treating you like an employee, when legally you're a co-owner. That's a problem. For them, not for you." She paused. "What do you want to do about this?" I hadn't slept in 2 days. My brain felt fuzzy around the edges, but one thing was crystal clear. I want what's mine. She helped me understand my options. I could demand profit distributions going back years. I could force a sale of the business. I could sue for damages, or I could do something simpler. I could just show up and claim my seat at the table. "What would you recommend?" I asked. "Depends on what you want. Money? Power? Both?" I thought about the son's face when he called me furniture, about all the years I spent being helpful and invisible, about Caleb, who would have hated seeing what the business had become, what the boss had become. "I want them to see me," I said. Bridget smiled. "Then let's make sure they can't look away." We spent the next 3 weeks building the case. Bridget contacted the boss's personal lawyer, sent over copies of all the documentation, requested an emergency meeting. The boss's lawyer called her back within 2 hours, voice tight with panic. Nobody at the company had any idea this existed. The boss himself didn't remember, or maybe he'd convinced himself it didn't matter after so many years of silence. Bridget also had the business appraised. She hired a firm that specialized in private company valuations. They spent a week going through financials, assets, client contracts, projected growth. When the report came back, the number made my hands shake. My half was worth $8.3 million. $8.3 million. I'd been showing up every day for 28 years, earning $52,000 annually, while sitting on a fortune nobody acknowledged. The meeting was set for a Thursday morning. Just me, Bridget, the boss, and his lawyer. The son wasn't invited, which the boss probably thought was a kindness, protecting his boy from the messy business details. I barely slept the night before, kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd act, but when I walked into that meeting room, all my planned words disappeared. The boss looked older than I'd ever seen him. His lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Lena," the boss started, but Bridget cut him off. "Let's keep this professional. My client has documentation proving she owns 50% of your business. This ownership has been valid since 2003 when she inherited it from her brother, your original partner. You failed to acknowledge this ownership, failed to provide profit distributions, failed to include her in any major business decisions. We're here to remedy that." The boss's lawyer shuffled papers. "Our position is that the extended silence on this matter constitutes abandonment of—" "It doesn't," Bridget said flatly. "Ownership doesn't expire because someone chooses not to exercise their rights immediately. Your client benefited from my client's silence for over 20 years. That ends now." I watched the boss's face. He wasn't angry. He looked sad, tired. "Lena, I'm sorry. I should have handled this when Caleb died. Everything was chaos. And then time passed, and I convinced myself it was fine. That you were fine. I was fine," I said quietly. "I was helpful. I was invisible. And you let me stay that way because it was convenient." "What do you want?" Bridget answered for me. "Fair market value for her 50% stake, $8.3 million. Or, alternatively, full recognition as managing partner with equal decision-making authority and profit sharing moving forward." The room went silent. The boss's lawyer whispered something to him. The boss shook his head, whispered back. They went back and forth for a full minute while Bridget and I sat there, waiting. Finally, the boss looked at me directly. "I can't pay you $8 million. The business doesn't have that kind of liquid capital. I'd have to take massive loans, sell assets, maybe sell the whole thing to a corporate buyer just to cash you out." "I know," I said. "So what are you really asking for?" "I'm asking to be seen, to be heard, to have a voice in something I've been part of building since before your son was born. I'm asking for what was always mine. His lawyer started to say something, but the boss held up his hand. "Give us a minute." The lawyer looked confused, but stood and left the room. Bridget looked at me. I nodded. She left too. Just me and the boss. 28 years of history sitting between us like a weight neither of us wanted to carry. "Your son called me office furniture," I said, in front of a dozen people, laughed about how nobody notices me. The boss closed his eyes. "I didn't know. You raised him to think that way. You let him grow up believing he's the center of everything, that people like me don't matter. And maybe part of that is my fault too, because I never demanded you see me differently. I just kept being useful and hoping that would be enough. It was enough. You've been invaluable. Invaluable, but invisible. There's a difference." He opened his eyes. They were wet. "What do I do now? You decide what matters more. Protecting your son's feelings, or doing what's right." The lawyers came back in. We talked for another hour. The boss couldn't afford to buy me out, couldn't risk me selling to someone else who might tear apart everything he'd built. So we made a deal. New partnership agreements. I became active managing partner, full profit sharing, equal say in all major decisions. My name on everything official. A real seat, not just a chair in the background. Bridged drew up the papers. We signed them that afternoon. The boss said he'd tell his son that evening. I said no. I wanted to tell him myself. The boss didn't like that, but he agreed. The next morning I arrived at my usual time. The son came in 20 minutes later, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, talking loud about some party he'd gone to the night before. He walked right past me without looking. At 10 o'clock, the boss called him into the main office. I waited 5 minutes, then followed, stood in the doorway. The boss saw me and gestured for me to come in. The son was sitting down, relaxed, probably thinking this was about his upcoming promotion. When I walked in, he barely glanced at me. "Why is she here?" he asked his father. The boss slid a document toward him. "Read this." The son picked it up, started reading. I watched his expression change. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something like panic. "What is this?" "Partnership agreement," I said. "Between your father and me. 50-50 split. Effective immediately." He looked at his father. "This is a joke." "It's not," the boss said. "Lena's brother was my original partner. When he died, she inherited his share. That's been legally valid for over 20 years. I should have handled it properly back then. I didn't. Now we're correcting that. So what? She just shows up with some old paper and you give her half the company? Half of everything you built?" "Everything we built," I corrected. "Your father had a partner. That partner had a sister who kept this place running through every crisis for nearly 3 decades. That sister is me. And yes, I showed up with old paper. Old legal paper that's been filed with the county since 1997. The son stood up. His face was red. "This is garbage. You can't just—" "I can," I said calmly. "The lawyer confirmed everything yesterday. Your father's lawyer too. It's done." He turned on the boss. "Dad, come on. This is insane. She's nobody. She just sits there and—" "She's your business partner now," the boss said, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "You will treat her accordingly. Do you understand?" The son stared at him, then at me. He looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet. "What does this mean?" he asked quietly. "It means I have equal say in company decisions going forward," I said. "It means I attend every board meeting. It means when we make plans about the future of this business, my voice matters as much as your father's. It means I'm not furniture." He stood there for a long moment, not speaking. Then he walked out, without another word. For the next 2 weeks, the son barely spoke to anyone. He came in late, left early, spent most of his time in his office with the door shut. Other employees noticed, started asking questions. The boss called a company meeting and explained that there had been some ownership clarification, that I was now officially a managing partner, that nothing else would change. People congratulated me. Some seemed genuinely happy. Others looked confused. A few looked resentful, probably wondering why I'd kept quiet all these years. The son didn't attend the meeting. 3 weeks after everything changed, we had our first major decision to make as partners. A supplier we'd worked with for years wanted to renegotiate their contract. The son had been handling that relationship. He wanted to accept their terms without pushback. I looked at the numbers and saw we were being overcharged by nearly 30%. compared to market rates. In the meeting, the son presented his recommendation. The boss started to nod along. I spoke up. We're overpaying. I ran comparisons with 4 other suppliers. We can get the same quality for significantly less. The son's jaw tightened. Those other suppliers don't have our history. Relationships matter. So does not wasting money, I said. I pulled out the data I'd compiled. 6 years of performance metrics, cost analyses, quality reports, everything laid out clean and clear. The boss studied the information, looked at his son, looked at me. Lena's right. We renegotiate, or we switch suppliers. The son left the meeting without speaking. 4 weeks later, the boss announced his retirement timeline. Not immediate, but starting in 6 months. Gradual transition over 2 years. And instead of handing everything to his son like everyone expected, he outlined a co-management structure. The son and I would run the company together. Equal authority, equal responsibility. The son's face went white when the boss explained this to the senior staff, but he didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Because legally, I had as much right to lead this company as anyone. After the announcement, the son found me near my workspace. He stood there for a minute, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. I didn't know, he finally said. About your brother, about any of it. I know. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't think I needed to. I thought doing the work would be enough. I thought being good at what I do would matter. He shifted his weight. The furniture thing. I'm sorry. That was wrong. Yes, it was. Are you going to fire me? The question surprised me. Why would I fire you? Because you could. Because I was awful to you. Because you have the power now. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was 28 but seemed younger in that moment. Scared. Lost. I don't want power over you, I said. I just want to be seen as a person who matters, who contributes, who's been here longer than you've been alive, and might actually know some things worth listening to. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll listen. I'll try to do better. That's all I'm asking. He left. And over the following months, something shifted. The son started showing up on time, started asking questions instead of assuming answers, started reviewing data before making recommendations. He wasn't perfect, still had moments of arrogance, still pushed back when he shouldn't, but he was learning. And me? I'm still in the same workspace I've had for 28 years. But now when people walk past, they stop. They ask my opinion. They wait for my input before making decisions. The son nods at me every morning, sometimes even says good morning. Last month, we landed that major buyer, the one from before. They came back for a second tour. This time, I gave part of the presentation, explained our quality control systems, answered their technical questions. When we got the signed contract 2 weeks later, the boss took me and the son out to dinner to celebrate. The 3 of us sat around a table, and for the first time in years, it felt like a partnership. The son raised his glass. To the team, he said. To the real team, the boss corrected, looking at me. The one that's been here all along. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect now. The son still has growing up to do. The boss still has habits that frustrate me. But things are different. Better. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not furniture. Sometimes people ask me why I waited so long. Why I didn't claim my ownership years ago. The truth is, I don't really know. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I thought staying quiet was safer than demanding what was mine. Maybe I needed someone to call me furniture before I remembered I was worth more than that. But I also think about Caleb a lot, about what he'd think of all this. And I believe he'd be proud, not because I humiliated anyone or destroyed anything, but because I finally stood up and said, I'm here, I matter, notice me. The best part? I didn't have to burn anything down to make them see me. I just had to show them what was there all along. Truth doesn't need drama, it just needs light. Thank you for sticking with me through this whole story. If it made you think about your own life, about times you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more real stories about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. And remember, furniture holds things up, but people who've been holding things up deserve to be recognized for the strength that takes.